We now know we are code, we are DNA code. We're about to build a civilization made of code in VRML. And we are learning, languages like Perl and C++. And I've spent a fair amount of time, not recently, but I remember it pretty well, studying Indian thought about sound. And it is a very profound and deeply worked out system, and it is definitely analogous to all of this. In the chakric system, which you're familiar with ad nauseum, I'm sure, but a part that is not normally stressed, but is very present in the original texts, is the idea that on the petals of these internal floral analogical structures are letters. And this is an extremely peculiar doctrine. Letters, which are sounds, seed mantras, and of course Vedic metaphysic is a whole theory of vibration. Much of Indian classical music, there are stories about musicians who could cause buildings to burst into flame by the power of their playing. I imagine that that's in some sense true. If you're interested in a fascinating study of all this that I've never heard anybody recommend in the New Age, it's apparently somehow out of their scope. It's a book by Arthur Avalon written in the 1920s called The Garland of Letters. And it's a discussion of the Mantra Shastra. Very, very interesting. And yes, the Vedic assumption is that Sanskrit is the primal revealed language, and that there are extremely special qualities associated with that language. This is interesting to talk about, or at least it's very interesting to me. As you probably know, Kabbalism, there is a whole schools of Hasidic mysticism where what it's about is the alphabet. And the Hebrew alphabet, for those people, is the primal Ursprach, and these are not simply letters, they are the letters. They are the letters that God intended to use to signify the presence of the G-D to man. Very interesting work on this by Stan Tenen, who's a fascinating figure, sort of like me in a way. I mean, I think half crackpot, half hopefully something else. But Stan has created a three-dimensional object, a sculpture, which, when illuminated with a bright source of light in a series of predictable points, casts shadows of all of the Hebrew letters. Do you understand what's happening here? It means that this object is a higher dimensional analog to the entire Hebrew alphabet, that you could think of the Hebrew alphabet as an object in hyperspace, slice it this way, Aleph, this way, Bet, this way, and so on. I told Ralph about this, Abraham, and he said, whoa, no problem. We could write a computer program that could take the letters of any language and backward engineer it upward to a higher dimension to get an object that would do that for Sanskrit, for English, for Arabic, whatever. And that seemed astonishing to me. And then he said, and you know what we could do once we had achieved that? We could take those probably five-dimensional objects, and we could do the calculation up to 8 or 9 or 10 dimensions, and we would eventually end up with an object that shed the letters of all alphabets into lower dimensions according to the angle of its regarding. Well, this kind of thing raises the hair on the back of my neck. We're actually getting somewhere, folks. And this sounds to me like God in some sense. I mean, I guess it's God to a print head. It's God as the fountainhead of all alphabetical and glyphic signification of meaning as it pours through the universe. Very, very interesting concept. I ran across a passage recently that I was completely startled by. It's in Herman Melville's book Marty, which is his youthful travel journals around the South Seas before he got into the big guns. And but at one point in Marty, there's a discussion among some seamen on the deck of a ship about the future. And one of them is asking, what does it mean? What is the future? And this seaman looks up and he says, "The future, 'tis all hieroglyphics." Very, very prescient comment, because as we now know, we are code, we are DNA code. We're about to build a civilization made of code in VRML. And we are learning, languages like Perl and C++, and so in a sense, the future is all hieroglyphic. I sort of feel that the world is all deception. It's some kind of a koan, or a problem, or a labyrinth, or a thing to be seen through. And if you don't figure it out, you would take it to be real. And then, it shunts you into the yawning grave. But if you can somehow realize that the purpose of your existence is to figure it out, and then figure it out, you will be, in some sense, liberated from it.